Welcome everyone. Firstly, I'd just like to say, in the spirit of reconciliation, the P&C Federation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nellie Walker. I'm the Far West Councillor and Vice President of P&C Federation. And Hannah Pierre-Burrell is our General Manager. She's also with us tonight. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for attending tonight's webinar. It's such a great response to see we have people from all around the state tonight advocating for rural and remote education, something that I'm very passionate about. This webinar was organised for you to not only support the needs of our members, but to provide a platform for our members to have a voice in helping to shape the future of rural and remote education in New South Wales. It provides an opportunity to engage and connect with our members across the state together on specific issues and to work in partnership with the New South Wales Department of Education to bring this presentation specifically to the P&C community. This is part of our newly established webinar series that P&C Federation have developed to address sector updates, member questions as they arise in response to changes and developments in the public education sector and that are relevant to our P&C associations. Please visit the events page on our website for more information about any of our upcoming webinars, and also please feel free to open the chat session as well if you need to access the consultation document and the link to the survey that Linda will take you through at the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce you to tonight's presenter. Dr. Linda Pennington-Wilson's 30+ year career in the New South Wales Department of Education has spanned the primary and secondary sectors of education in various leadership positions. Dr. Pennington-Wilson's 16-year parallel career in the tertiary sector at the University of Wollongong, Western Sydney University, and most recently supervising doctoral candidates at Notre Dame University in Sydney, includes the preparation of a generation of teachers through the Master of Teaching and Masters of Education programs. She's presented at national and international conferences. However, she does claim her daily classroom teaching has always been the highlight of her career. Linda recently held the position of CEO within the Leadership and High Performance Directorate and comes to the newly established Rural Pathways Unit in 2020 to fulfil a career ambition of knowing more about rural education. So I'll now hand over to you, Linda, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A.
Natalie, thank you so very much. And I would like to echo the sentiments that you mentioned by acknowledging the land on which I'm speaking to you from, and that's the Gadigal land. And I know that the lands in New South Wales have been used for teaching and learning for tens of thousands of years. And so I'm hoping to learn from you all tonight. Thank you for your time. This is a great privilege for me to hear stories and talk to people who really have terrific experience and can help us inform and shape the directions that we're going to be going into the future. I'd like to, throughout this presentation, share my screen a couple of times to show you things that we've prepared for this evening. I just will do so right this minute, and I'm hoping that you will be able to see a document that I'm going to be referring to. You might even open this up. I know that it was sent to those registered members, and if you are to just at your leisure have a little bit of a look at what we've been doing with a stakeholder consultation process. Our Rural and Pathways Education Unit has been established, newly established, in August of last year. And we set about doing an informal consultation with all of our external, internal and groups stakeholders. And from that, we have prepared this document. So it outlines exactly what we've been up to. The background of the document explains how we've gathered some information and what we've come up with. And this is what we have learnt so far. And this makes up the majority of my presentation tonight. So we've learnt from you and others that we really need to invest and value our people, that we need to strengthen quality teaching and learning, and that has to do about pedagogical practice. We also have heard very strongly about the learning environment, and that means a platform. And we've called the last one partnerships because we just can't get along on our own in a silo. And we know that the richness that partnerships, collaboration, and consultation bring to our department. So this evening, I wanted to speak to you about the sorts of things that we found for a very diverse set of communities across the state of New South Wales. I can't believe how similar the stories were. And so we've got a few of these really common themes that we're going to look at tonight. And this is what I want your feedback on, please. So if you scroll to the bottom of the document, I want you to have your say tonight, and I want you to share with me your experiences, and I would love for you to fill in an online survey. So you can reach that survey, and we can almost have it as a sing-along version to tonight's PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to do. So that can be reached by hitting that hyperlink. But if you're one of those people who really don't want to come back to having something written down and you're not terribly sure where it's going to go or who's going to be reading it, if you would prefer to write something personal or private, please find an email address where I answer those emails. That's my email box for this purpose of consultation. And you can feel very secure that I will read that, and I will certainly be attending to your questions or looking at the feedback that you've given me from there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for one moment, just checking if there are any questions for me thus far, and the answer's no so far. So what I will do now is just go into a presentation, but before I do, you might want a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, and if you do, that's fine. I'm happy to send it to you, and it has notes, presenter notes, so it's almost like a train the trainer. If you have some friends or people from your school, or you want to take this to your next P&C meeting at your school, happy for you to show it, and there are some notes underneath, so that will help you do the presentation.
Linda, I'll just step in at this point. That's a great idea, I think, because we are recording the webinar tonight, and what we can do is upload the PowerPoint as well along with the webinar, so that PNCs can access that.
Yeah, we want to be very transparent about this process of consultation and data gathering and information. We'd be happy for people to use it. So I'm going to share my screen again. One moment, please. So we do want to shape the future of rural education, but we're smart enough to realise we can't do that alone. And when you consider the vastness of New South Wales, we really have a huge job on our hands. When you think about it, it's 45% of schools and 25% of students. And we also know that a gap still exists. And this is, you know, hard news for all of us to hear and for me to speak it. We know that a gap still exists between some of the student learning outcomes from areas that are rural, remote, outer and inner regional areas compared to their metro counterparts. So I really don't think that that's fair, and I'm very well aware of what happens in the rest of the world, and that is communities, countries and people who are happy and thrive have a high quotient of equity, and that's backed up with access. Now, what I'm looking for tonight is your views about how we might boost equity and access. And this is why the parent voice is so important. I'm just going to put my screen on because I want to really appeal to you face to face. It is so important. You trust 135,000 people, just like me, who are career tragic people from the Department of Education, those people who work in SAS as janitors, as people in government offices for the department, and teachers in the classroom. We know that our duty of care is sacrosanct. You give us that duty of care willingly, but we want to try and make the outcomes for learners in rural education the same level as those people in metro areas. Please, tonight is your chance to have your say. So please fill in that survey. If you don't know about a particular program or you can't think of an example, just write NA, skip to the next thing. And question 4 will always be, listen, tell us what you know. So it's a very open-ended, and that's where you put all of your great ideas and your feedback for us, please. Okay, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. One moment. So from the first round of informal consultation with our partners, we found that there were a lot of common issues that emerged from our feedback. And these have been grouped into these call-out boxes. So that was the classification. They were summarised in that way. What you also need to be aware of, that we want to lift rural education, but we can only do that by consulting and listening. We're going to build on the lessons that we've learned, but maybe it's up to you to teach us some lessons as well. And I'm here to take that, on the chin. We need you to be a partner, and I've already spoken to your general manager and your president this evening and co-opted them into a feedback reviewer kind of style for our collaboration for our internet pages. So hopefully I'll get some feedback about that as well. We also needed you to know that we're sticking to the Department of Education strategic priorities. And this was the summary that I mentioned in that previous document about what we found. So there are 4 emerging themes, and they're there for you to read. And the remainder of the slides for this presentation, look at those 4 key areas. So it's structured that we talk about the key area, and then the next slide will be the questions. So if I can just go back to key area 1, investing and valuing in our people really means about how do we approach universities to get the best graduates to come into hard to staff schools in regional, remote, very remote, or inner regional areas, because we know that there are difficulties in staffing, getting casual teachers, and also there's a great, we call it a churn. It's a turnover of staff that may not happen in other places of the state, but it seems to have an impact in the continuity of learning for students. So how do we do that? Once we've got them employed, how do we get them to stay in those areas and make sure that they connect with the students for the majority of their either primary years or secondary years? I believe I'm just going to have a look at question. Good idea. Okay, thank you. So we're also trying to think about the best ways to promote leadership capabilities for our staff in rural education. So we know that there's a lot of people with a lot of experience, but we also know that there is a real need for the building of leadership capabilities while you're there, while you're posted somewhere in regional New South Wales or rural New South Wales. So we understand, and especially COVID has been the most incredible situation of all. I think it's for the Department of Education, it has made us stand ourselves in the corner and have a good hard look at ourselves. Some things have been accelerated. We had ideas that we've been able to just drop everything and then just focus on accelerating the sort of help that we know needed to be there for, say, technology to learn from home. But also, we've also appreciated very starkly, I believe, appreciated the need for wraparound services for well-being for not just the student enrolled in a school, but the family. So we also want to make sure that people stay within the Department of Education and make it a great place to work. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to have a look at these 4 questions. Now, these 4 questions are the same. They're just repeated for each of the key areas. So the first one is, okay, what have we done that you think we should continue in as much as we've given for key area number 1, we've given scholarships for people who are the best and brightest to go to university and then come in and be streamlined in their employment with the Department of Education. We've given incentives for people to go to regional and rural areas in New South Wales to teach. So what are some of the things that we should keep? Okay, we may need to tweak things that we've done, and let's get creative here. There are some innovations that may happen across your mind and think it would be, oh, that's okay, but it would work better if. Then be brutal for question number 3. What hasn't worked? What's been a waste of time and a waste of resources? And what has been just outdated, really? And then this is the question number 4 that I'm talking about. If you're not aware of programs or initiatives, or if you can't think of an example of that you want to talk about, but you do have some feedback to give us, question 4 is the one for you. Do you feel that there are any other initiatives, programs, or ideas that need to be considered? Parents and citizens, have your say. This is where I'd love you to fill that survey in and let us know. Key area 2, let's be really honest, and I've been a teacher for 37 years now, so I can handle the truth, but let's be really honest. There are some teachers, actually I'm going to look you square in the face and tell you this. There are some teachers that probably haven't reached the zenith of their career yet. There are some teachers who are going to get there in the end. There are some people who they just may not have had their best day ever. And there are those career days that you think, oh gosh, I wish I could do that over. But we also know that there are some brilliant practitioners out there as well. But how do we grow the brilliant practitioners, the fabulous teachers who change kids' lives? And how do we deal with some of those situations where it's taken a teacher more than a couple of years to really get up to speed and to be providing quality teaching to your child? So tell us what to do. Give me some ideas. So sometimes it's about focusing on the early years. What we know is that countries in the world who have great quotient of happiness, have fulfilled children, and parents, and they have started their education at age 4, a year before school actually starts, kindergarten actually starts. So we know that that pre-learning is absolutely vital. And if the child doesn't get that, then sometimes those children just do not catch up within the next 12 years. So that is really something that I'm passionate about. We also want to make sure that quality teaching is something that is regularly practiced widely and every day. We don't want to waste any time at school either. And we also want there to be some really easy ways for people to get better support to deliver their curriculum. If they're not an absolute expert yet, let's get them some help. So if there's anything that you could advise us on, I'm going to go to the next slide because they're the same 4 questions, and I'll just show you those now. The survey takes about, it is 16 questions. Some are demographic, so you just click a button. There might be some questions that you go, NA, I don't really know about that. I think when I created it, it was meant to take between 11 and 15 minutes to complete. So I hope that I've answered that question. Thank you, James. How many people are viewing this evening? 51. And I really have asked for this to happen because I really did want to reach rural, regional and remote parents. And I think that's all for the moment. Thank you.
Linda, just quickly, we had some questions come through in the chat facility. Erica wanted to know what programs you believe are being implemented in rural areas. That's just one of the questions.
I'm Erica. I'm hoping that you're speaking about key area number 1 and 2. So what happens is that for teachers to take up a position in a rural or very remote school, something of that nature, outside of the metro areas in New South Wales, which are the coastal strip mainly, there are incentives. So each school is given a ranking of points. So I used to teach at a 2-point school. So every year you get 2 points for being at that school. But if I were to go to, say, Broken Hill, which is very remote, I might get, or something like a central school that is very remote, 4 hours out of Cobar, I might get 8 points per year. Those points can be used in a transfer system. So that is one incentive. There's also another incentive that is teacher housing. Sometimes rental subsidies are paid. There's a 50% rental subsidy, there's a 70%, and then there's a 90%. And that's on a scale about remoteness and where the teacher has to go and has to live and the housing stock that's available. So, Erica, I hope that answers your question. Were there any other questions that you could see, Hannah?
There was another question. Eric also raised another quick question around our principal stated I should not, as a parent, ask too many questions, that I should be thankful for all the staff have provided, as if their achievement has been in isolation from home life, which I disagree with. Any thoughts on that?
Certainly, I'm not sure of the particulars of the setting, but look, I am very grateful that you're here. And if you would like to write to me, please use that address in that background paper. And then you and I'll probably have a phone chat. And I would love to get the sort of context and background so that I could include that if you're feeling that you're not getting some answers, then I could farm out that question and get a response and write back to you. And I'm delighted to do that. No problem at all.
A couple more questions, Linda, that we might just quickly go through before we move on. Yeah. So one is a question from Nicole. Is there a remote local scholarship program to encourage locals to study teaching, then return to their communities?
Brilliant, brilliant question. And if this could be turned into one of your ideas, it would be ideal. At the moment, we just have universities who give out those scholarships, or the Department of Education. And there's, at the moment, Nicole, at the moment, there's no classification to have rural people learn and then go back to their rural communities. Now, when I used to teach at Western Sydney, I used to teach in the Aboriginal unit, and that idea was an innovation. We would take people from country, make them do a residential course. The teaching degree took 5 years to finish, which is a very elongated process. However, it worked in with their families, their communities, and their work life. And what would happen is that those people, Aboriginal people themselves, were put back into that community to teach. Now, in Canada, what happens is that if you're in a very remote place within any of the provinces in Canada, what happens is that your local school becomes the university because it's the technology hub. So people might work during the day, come to the school at night school, and then they learn from the university who beams out all of the university course. Those people then those aspiring teachers do their practicum, their practice teaching in the school, and then they eventually get a job in the school. Sensational. So Nicole, your idea, if you could turn that back into your survey about the opportunity for rural people to enter teaching in that way, ideal.
Another one from Damien. Linda, isn't there also research that supports that children learn and grow to be happier by starting school later, like 6 years of age, and they focus on the power of play rather than the pressure of reading and writing, for example, in Finland?
Finland do that, but they have done that in the past. What they've done now, and Pasi Solsberg, who's come to Australia, he said that in the last 4 or 5 years, what Finland has done is they've actually started earlier. Now, when I was going through teacher education many years ago, I was always told that play until you're about 6 was ideal, and that you should let people enjoy their childhood without the, as Damien says, the pressure. However, what we're now seeing some 40 years later is that what we've got is a mountain of evidence to say that early learning is really the go, and that's the way that Australia's going, and certainly New South Wales Education Department are advocating.
And the question from Amy, are there incentives for teachers to stay in regional and rural areas for a length of time?
Amy, you genius. There are some, but what I've heard from other people, especially from these wide consultations, that there's a belief that those incentives should be not just for particular positions that people hold or for 2 years or something, but they should be more widely spread. So maybe that's a question that you can put into, you can actually put a question into your survey, because what we need, a lot of us, we know these things, but unless you have those artifacts, that evidence base that a survey gives us, then we can't make claims. We can know it in our hearts, but can't really make claims about it. So
We'll finish a couple more questions, Linda, and then you can
Yeah.
sort of move on. Just last question,
Sure.
a couple more from Saba. Will the rural students can ever taste the flavor of having a career fair in a rural community?
Can ever have the flavour of, sorry?
Having a career fair, I guess the feel or the experience of a career fair in a rural community.
Look, I'm glad you've asked that. So a fantastic question. I'll tell you why. I'm just going to be able to give you a date. Pardon me while I look at my screen. We are doing a virtual careers expo, and that happens on the 22nd and the 23rd of July. So that's the first week back at school. So that's Wednesday and Thursday of week 1, term 3. And we know that, okay, this was a COVID innovation, but we've now got 300 career providers coming to that expo. So that would be fantastic as an experience, get a real taste, and that would certainly be something that I could put you in touch with.
Last question is from Priti. Is curriculum different in rural and metro areas?
No. The way it may be delivered, and I would love to actually just focus on this in key area 3. In some, the curriculum is the same, and we've gone to a national curriculum. However, the way that some of it is delivered has to be varied, simply because you may not have a year 12 student doing the HSC who wants to study economics be able to have access to a fully qualified, experienced specialist, economist, teacher. And so what we might do is we might do some local things with a classroom teacher who may not be an economics graduate from university, but may have commerce, may have done a Bachelor of Commerce in their initial degree before they came into teaching. And then they may supplement the rest of the curriculum delivered through the Access program. And the Access program is something that's been going for 30 years. And they have a specialist teacher who shares resources, but also is responsible for part of those, the delivery of those lessons. And that's my key area 3. So that's a beautiful segue straight into back to my PowerPoint. Were there any other questions, Hannah? And thanks for facilitating.
I think we've got it covered, so yeah.
Okay, so keep those questions coming. I'll answer as best I can. So we're going to go to key area 3. And there's not too much more to get through. But this was something that really exposed a lot of trouble points for NBN coverage and satellite coverage and technical access. So what we've really learned from the COVID experience has been huge. I know that the Director of Rural and Pathways, Laurie Campbell, actually had was drawn into the ABC and Department of Education partnership to provide lessons and learning through TV, through ABC TV. So we know that it exposed, we actually had a situation where we had one of our partners, and you don't get anywhere without help in life, do you? So we had, I think it was a transport company that usually work with us in a vet situation, vocational education situation, and they delivered 400 dongles out to areas that really had trouble accessing internet. So we've learnt a lot, but I also would be very interested in hearing exactly what your experiences are around this. We also know that expanding the curriculum provision, there's a learning project that we've got on the boil in the background that our aim is to really expand the curriculum provision to be able to offer more to our stage 6 students particularly. So that's when we really need those specialist teachers that may not be in every area. So we want to know what your experiences are. So please answer those questions. Of course, it's not applicable if you aren't, if you're not really aware of those situations. Your child may still be in primary school and this doesn't really affect you so much. So an NA is perfectly fine. But if you've got some innovation that you've learned from your own COVID experience, then please put that in that question 4, which always would look like this. Do you feel there are any other initiatives, programs or ideas? And that's what we're here for tonight, some ideas. Just moving on to key area 4, productive partnerships. And I was speaking to Hannah and Natalie. I'm not sure that there's been such a fulsome engagement with so many parents before. But I'm really glad that our opportunity this evening is just the starting point. So I do acknowledge that I could not have possibly have got through my career without going to P&C meetings, without going to meet the parent, meet the teacher evenings. There's just no way that we can possibly do without you. So this is really an area where you are the expert. So being end users of the Department of Education, you've probably looked at cross-department support. There are other stakeholders that you'd be aware of and associations and opportunities to expand that. And we also wanted you to know that we are really feeding information back into our colleague departments. So we've spoken with transport, health, primary industries, regional, the new portfolio, regional, New South Wales, all sorts of people, Flying Doctor Service, CWA, lots and lots of people who are able to think about the way that we might align ourselves and make things easier for people and families within remote communities or regional or inner regional communities. And so we wanted to know what your answers were to these same four questions. Most of all, we wanted to thank you for your time. It's really terrific that you have registered and are participating. So I'm very humbled, but very, very grateful to you. And let's take some further questions if there are any.
There's quite a few, Linda, from the Q&A, so I'll leave that to you.
So in the rural areas I'm in, there's a real lack of workforce management for exceptional retiring teachers to mentor new teachers. Oh, isn't this a great innovation to have those people mentor those coming in who replace us? I always like to think of my role, whatever role I'm in, as a succession planning opportunity. So yes, I think that turning that around and making the retiring exceptional teacher the mentor, and perhaps you can mention that perhaps needs to be acknowledged in a paid situation, right? I know that when I was a consultant way back for early career teachers, my portfolio, I was the only consultant in the state and I had early career teachers. And so I hired a whole lot of principals who would have been on the golf course, They had just retired, but they walked out with all this corporate knowledge. And I thought, right, let's bring them back. Their wives would have been grateful that most of them were men, that they weren't on the golf course the whole time. And we were able to pay them casually. So under a casual pay scheme, that is. And that is a fantastic innovation of yours. So if you could put that in and offer that up, that's marvelous thinking. Thank you. And then how do the retiring teachers start to access? It would have to be a program. It might be an initiative that we start ourselves from the Rural and Pathways unit that I would be the coordinator of. Training and frequency is required for teachers to keep them current and interested. How is this determined? Through a PDP, that's Personal Development and Professional Development Plan. And each teacher, each member of staff in the Department of Education has their supervisor construct a PDP. There are between 3 and 5 goals annually. Sometimes you're told, Linda, you really need to practice this, that, or the other. And sometimes I might come back with, look, I know that I'm going to need to teach French next year because our French teacher is retiring and I will need a refresher course. So I will need to go and do Allier Français night courses. So those sorts of things are jointly negotiated and determined based on the needs of the school. And the frequency is, there's compulsory, compliant, mandatory compliance sort of courses that we have to complete every year, usually to do with health, safety and child protection. And there are other things that may be determined, such as if you get a new position as a principal or a deputy principal or an aspiring, an AP in a primary school, assistant principal in a primary school, there's a 3-day or a 2-day conference and then a follow-up day, and that would be mandatory to attend so that you get all of the information from the Department of Education at the one time with a cohort that then supports you. But sometimes there's a discretionary factor and a principal might send a teacher on a particular learning course. However, learning courses generally, back in the old days when I was a girl, they used to be during school time and they might be 3 or 4 days per year and you would just go to these conferences. Generally now they are webinars. They happen from 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 4:15 and they are on weekends and in school holidays. I know that most of my professional learning has been after hours, and I might go to 2019, when I was in school as a deputy, I had 4 days out of school because of planning with my director. So that's the exception these days usually. So of the 32 years of university study that I've done to professionally develop myself, none of that's been in school time. So it just depends what the needs of your school are. Sometimes I had to go and be retrained in a different subject to be able to teach something that my school needed. So I would do the 4-year course. But anyway, I hope that kind of answers your question, Amy. Are there any other questions?
Just thinking about your time, Linda, it's now close to 7:45. So it might be a good time to actually maybe just talk a bit about the survey and how you would encourage everyone to complete the survey beyond today.
Most definitely. If you have those questions, hopefully we might be able to. What about, Hannah, if we can save that chat, I can go back through and I can
absolutely,
individual
definitely.
answers. But
we can forward that to you.
That's a pleasure. For the moment, if you just go into the link that Hannah has sent you and open up that survey, I would be immensely grateful. My fear is that we will have a top-heavy Department of Education teacher voice, and my students won't be heard, and my CWA won't be heard, and my people who do transport or people who take kids on work experience won't be heard. The few who do will drown. So for ethical types of research, you've got to make sure that you have a representation, a proportion represented in each little tick box. So a proportion of parents from all of the regions in New South Wales, a proportion of people who are industry and partners, and a proportion that are health, and a proportion that are Department of Education people. But I do not want this to be a top-heavy survey where teachers just have their say and nobody else does. My dearest desire is that I have 300 parent voices. I don't have 300 at the moment, but please, if you could get them to me, there's a weight of evidence there. Have your say, now's the time. And please fill it in. If you don't know the answer to a question or you don't know quite what to write, NA, skip that and go along. The penultimate question is, okay, maybe I haven't asked you something. Here's your chance. And that you can write your manifesto about exactly what you think should happen. And at least that will go into the mix. So please, please. But I want to thank you. It might take you 15 minutes, but well worth it. Because I don't think that the department has actually ever gone out to so many. We have reached 4,000 people in our consultation, which is exceptional. But let's have the parent voice. I've already got 248 student voices. I need a few more. So if you want to give this to your child, please do so. And thank you, everyone, once again. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Hannah. And I suppose I'll just add to that, just on a few questions there. Conversation, like Linda said, doesn't want to be, top heavy on this survey on teachers, and we really want you as parents to have your say and have a voice for our children and our schools in regional, rural and remote New South Wales. There's some questions there on Aurora, and I can say, Aurora has been one of the great successes of the Department of Education in their previous rural and remote blueprint strategy. And this information that we're putting forward is helping to build that new strategy, for our kids, for our schools, for our teachers, and for our families and communities. So, like Linda said, please don't feel you have to just look at the questions and think you know everything. We've identified in Federation 10 areas in regards to rural remote, and they look at transport, technology, infrastructure, pathways and technology and transitions, parent engagement, communication and consultation, leadership, quality teaching, wellbeing and curriculum and assessment. So when you're looking at those 4 areas, you can look at those things and, and see, what has been your experience? Have you had a really positive experience in a program or initiative that your principal or teachers implemented? Or, is there been something that's, not worked really well and you've got a suggestion that you can make it better? So we really need your voice. I think we've had 52 participate, Hannah.
More than that, actually, because people have been in and out.
Oh, okay. So that's
Yeah.
been fantastic and definitely exceeded our expectations for tonight. So, I thank you all very much.
And Nat, before you wrap up, I just wanted to encourage everyone. We still have quite a number of questions coming through as we're starting to wrap up. So as Linda has offered, we will collate all those questions that haven't been answered. We will forward it to Linda, and we'll do what we can to respond to those in detail. Alternatively, Linda has also said that you can post those questions in the survey itself so that they're not forgotten or lost in the overall scheme of things. So the webinar has been recorded, and this will be posted up on the member portal sometime soon.
And Brendan, please write about your laptops. No matter if you're in the Murray-Darling Basin, my goodness me, can you make that a suggestion, please? Because we actually had to do that in COVID, and we know that it worked, and my goodness was it needed. And there was a place that we went out to. the child did not have a table in the house to put the laptop on. So let's get, this is Australia 2020. Let's get this organised, people.
Yeah.
Parents,
Technology,
power.
you know, and that's really something we've been advocating a lot for as well. And the department have a program there, and we need to emphasise that we need it more within our schools, and we need that funding there. So
let's hear it.
Bring it in, please, to Linda. And again, you know, I'd just like to thank everyone. We really appreciate your feedback as well on tonight's webinar. So if you can respond to the survey that will be emailed out to you at the end of the event, that would be fantastic. You know, as Linda said, send it out to other members in your P&C associations. It needs to be completed by the 17th of July. So feel free to do that. And like Linda said, you know, get your children to fill it in as well, and let's get that student voice happening. You know, I thank you all, and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Linda.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Matt.
Linda.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.